Hello everyone, welcome to Property Ponderings. My name is Craig Nichol from Nichol Buyer Advisory in Melbourne, Australia, where we help people buy, renovate and sell properties. With over 15 years of experience as an agency owner, property investor, renovator and buyer's agent, I want to help you make better property buying decisions and build the future that you're chasing. So today we are tackling a significant topic, the Victorian Government's latest housing policy that aims to boost high-density development near public transport hubs across Melbourne. While this presents some fantastic opportunities, especially for current landowners and developers, it also carries some serious risks, particularly for those who own or are thinking of buying apartments. We'll discuss both sides of the coin today and how some homeowners stand to benefit while others could see property values stagnate or even fall. The Victorian Government has announced a plan to develop 50 high-density activity centres near key train stations and tram stops. These areas will see significant changes, with taller buildings and an influx of new apartments and townhouses, all aimed at delivering 300,000 new homes by 2051. The government's goal is to create more affordable housing, particularly for young professionals, families and downsizers in well-connected areas with easy access to public transport. The suburbs already in the first wave of this transformation include Caulfield, Frankston, Camberwell, Chadstone, Glen Waverley, Brighton, Ringwood, Preston, Broadmeadows, North Melbourne and the Essendon-Niddrie area. These suburbs are targeted because of their strong transport links, and the government's vision is to cluster housing around these hubs to reduce traffic congestion and make Melbourne more livable. And this is the case and has been for a long time, since the Melbourne 2030 plan came out in, I'm guessing, around the early 2000s. That they have been trying to build high density around public transport and activity centres, as we all would have seen, but now it's just going to a whole new level. So the opportunities for landowners and developers. If you own land or a house in one of these designated activity centres, the future could look bright. The government's new zoning rules mean that properties near train stations and tram stops are going to be rezoned for even higher density use. This presents a huge opportunity for landowners who could now look to develop their blocks into multi-unit sites, significantly increasing the value of their property. For example, if you own a single house on a decent sized block in Preston or Caulfield, you could potentially be rezoned to potentially then subdivide into multiple townhouses or build a small apartment complex. This is a key moment for landowners to think about selling to developers or partnering with them to build this higher density housing on their land. Developers will be eyeing off these opportunities, and if you own one of these blocks, you could find yourself in a strong negotiating position. So don't be surprised if you start getting more letters in your letterboxes and some more knocks on your door. For developers, the new zoning changes are a green light to move into these well-connected suburbs and build multi-unit residential developments if they have the funds to do so. Medium and high-rise apartments will be the focus, particularly around the central cores near transport hubs, while townhouses and lower-rise apartments will be more common in the outer zones of these activity centres. If you're a developer with an eye on Preston or Frankston, now's the time to start planning, especially before other developers inevitably flood that market. Now, there are risks for existing apartment owners, and I see that with falling values and increased competition from a rental and a sales point of view. So not all property owners will come out ahead in this new plan. If you currently own an apartment in one of these areas, whether that's Preston, Moorabbin, Glen Waverley, there's a real risk that you could see the value of your property stagnate or fall. And we've already seen within Melbourne that the high density areas such as South Bank, Docklands, many inner city areas where the densities have been increased and a lot of apartments have come, it's meant that the established apartments that were already in the area have struggled to see price growth because the supply has just been so continual. So with the government pushing for more high density housing, we're going to see a flood of new apartments hit the market. When supply increases that much in a short time, prices do often fall. Again, many of the apartments in Melbourne over the last 10 or 15 years have seen falls or stagnation due to that high amount of supply that's come into the market. Investors that currently own apartments in these activity centres might find it difficult to sell at a profit in the future, or at least in the near future, and the market will be flooded with new, often more modern apartments that may outshine existing stock, leading to a situation where older apartments could struggle to maintain their value. And when we're talking about that older style apartment, we're talking apartments that were built, higher density ones that were built in the last 20 or 30 years. Older apartments where we're talking in the 40s, 50s and 60s that were built, that's a different kettle of fish, and they're often found not necessarily right in activity centres, but might maybe be on nice side streets and in parklands, which is a separate conversation to the one we're having now, which is really about the impact on people that own more modern apartments that are potentially going to have new apartments built that are quite similar, but only just a little bit more modern. So they're really fighting in that exact same market compared to older stock, which arguably is in a slightly different market, with the type of apartment being often on smaller blocks with less units, potentially bigger bedrooms, and nicer, or offering more appeal and character, especially with the Art Deco style or red brick 60s units. So they are a little bit different. So I just want to make sure I've emphasised that. But the big thing is for those as well, not just looking to sell, but looking to rent out their apartments, there could be even more competition, especially as newer developments offer modern amenities and attractive designs. The increased supply of rental properties will likely push rents down, making it more difficult to find tenants or forcing you to accept lower rental prices. This is particularly true in areas like Preston, where there's already a strong demand for apartments, but where the coming supply might saturate the market. The thing I'd like to mention here is that, again, a lot of the newer housing that the government is building and pushing for is apartments, because you can get the most amount of people into an area with high density apartments, but it's not necessarily what buyers want. Most buyers are wanting houses or townhouses. They're wanting more space, and understand that that's coming with a higher cost. But what we're doing here is we're creating more apartments that aren't necessarily that desirable, and providing people home, which is a property to live in, which is essential. But it's also building a whole lot of apartments that, if first home buyers are caught buying those properties, there could be a number of risks. So it's great that they're offering housing supply. But for those investors, maybe first-time investors, young investors, or first home buyers that are purchasing these sorts of properties, they're going to find themselves in a really difficult position in the 2, 3, 5, 10 years time afterwards, where they're trying to potentially upgrade and they have a family or other things going on. It's a situation where they may find themselves that the price hasn't moved much, so they can't upgrade, or the price has gone backwards and they're in negative equity. So there's all sorts of negative situations when these new apartments come on the market and they look attractive and they're all being built, but there is issues for the people actually purchasing them. So this sort of property that is being pushed through this housing policy is definitely something that I would be avoiding for my clients, and something that I think first home buyers have a great risk of destroying 5 to 10 years of their potential wealth creation by getting involved with a development like this as well. I don't know all the details, but I'm talking in general about buying in these high density areas where even there's thousands of properties that are meant to be built in these areas as direct competition. It's just very difficult to see how prices would rise, and that you would get that growth to ensure a strong financial future for yourself. So the other thing, if you're a homeowner living in one of these suburbs, particularly in a low density area, you might be concerned about how these things could impact the value of your property. While some people may benefit from their land being rezoned from development, others could see the value of their homes decrease if they suddenly find themselves surrounded by high-rise buildings. Take Camberwell or Brighton, for example. These are traditionally low-density, heritage-rich suburbs. The introduction of taller apartment blocks in these areas could drastically change the feel of the neighbourhood. Homeowners who once enjoyed quiet, leafy streets may find their properties overshadowed by larger developments, reducing the appeal of their own homes. In some cases, the presence of high-rise buildings could even reduce privacy, light and views, making these homes less attractive to potential buyers. This is a concern particularly in heritage suburbs like Brighton and Armadale, where residents value the character and the low-rise nature of the area. If you own a home in one of these areas, it's worth considering how these changes could affect your property's future marketability if you are thinking about selling in the near term. So for those thinking of buying into these new high-density developments, it's important to proceed with caution. While it might seem tempting to purchase a shiny new apartment in a freshly developed area, the reality is that investing in high-density developments have proven to be very risky, especially in the Melbourne-specific market and the way that things function here. When too many apartments are built in a short period, oversupply can lead to lower property values and weaker rental yields. Buyers looking to make a profit or see capital growth might be disappointed. Apartments in high-density zones often don't perform as well as houses or townhouses when it comes to long-term capital growth, particularly when there's a flood of new stock coming onto the market at once. The other thing to consider as well is with the rushed pace of development, there's a risk that some of these projects may be built too quickly, compromising on the quality. If construction is rushed to meet demand, it could lead to buildings with poor finishes or structural issues down the line, and investors should be aware of this and thoroughly research developers before purchasing in these new activity centres. So the key takeaways for property owners and investors, we need to consider landowners in activity centres like Preston, Caulfield and Frankston are in a prime position to benefit. Redeveloping or selling their block for development could significantly boost your property's value. Apartment owners should be cautious though. The influx of new high-density housing will likely lead to an oversupply, meaning the value of existing apartments could stagnate or even fall. Renting out apartments could also become more difficult with increased competition driving rental prices down. Homeowners in traditionally low-density areas might find themselves surrounded by taller developments, which could impact the character of their suburb and potentially reduce the value of their homes. Buying into high-density developments could be risky. Oversupply and the potential for rush construction make these apartments a less attractive option for those seeking capital growth or reliable rental returns. Of course, if you can find a nice boutique apartment development on a side street or with some sort of unique appeal and floor plan and ticking a lot of boxes, there are a very small percentage of apartments that do meet a investment grade quality, but they're far and few between. So you have to be extremely careful if you are looking into those markets. So in conclusion, the Victorian Government's housing policy is set to transform many parts of Melbourne, creating opportunities for some, but risks for others. For landowners, this could be a golden opportunity to unlock the development potential of your block. However, if you own or are considering buying an apartment in these high-density zones, it's important to think carefully about the long-term risks of oversupply and declining values. Alright, well that wraps up another episode of Property Ponderings. I hope today's discussion has given you a clear understanding of how the Victorian Government's new housing policy could impact your property decisions. I am not sitting on either side of the fence. I understand that the policy is trying to increase housing numbers for people that need essential housing. So that's a given. I think the conversation today is more about trying to just make you aware of what's going on for homeowners and buyers, and also just a few pitfalls or traps for people to be aware of and be able to then make decisions moving forward that can better their own financial future. We don't have a crystal ball exactly on how the developments will pan out and whether prices will go up or down, but I've just given my opinion on what's likely to happen based on recent trends from other similar situations within the Melbourne market. But if you'd like to discuss any part of the podcast further or need tailored advice on buying or renovating, feel free to contact me on 0400 122 081 or at craig@nicholbioadvisory.com.au. Thanks for listening, and I'll chat to you again soon. Thank you. information provided in this podcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal or professional advice. While we aim to provide accurate and up-to-date information, every property transaction and investment is unique. You should seek the advice of a qualified professional before making any financial decisions. The opinions expressed in this podcast are our own and are not a substitute for tailored advice from a financial advisor or a real estate professional. We encourage you to consult with a qualified expert who can address your specific needs and circumstances.